pleasure to introduce Ms. Carol Higgins Clark. As many of you know, of course, Ms. Clark is the best-selling author of the Regan Reilly Mysteries series. She has written 14 novels. All of them have very catchy, snappy, clever titles. Snagged, Hitched, and Zapped come to mind. I recently read Mobbed, her most recent work, and I have to admit I really enjoyed all the local, familiar Jersey Shore references. I especially enjoyed the fact that there was no mention of Snooki.
I refrained.
Please welcome our guest tonight, Ms. Carol Higgins Clark.
Well, thank you, Linda, for that lovely introduction. It's so nice to be here. You know, I don't take nice introductions for granted because when I first started as a writer, I was asked to be down in Florida at a fundraiser in Broward County. They brought authors down and we all were having dinner at different people's homes. They had their friends in who paid to be at the dinners, and I actually was on a yacht. A couple had the dinner on their yacht, which was nice, except when the friends were coming onto the yacht, I was standing there with the couple, and the man kept saying, "Say hello here to Susan Clark. Say hello to Susan." And I just kept saying, "Hello, hello," you know. And then the wife finally heard him. She looked at me, rolled her eyes, and whispered in his ear, "It's Nancy." So anyway, so I certainly appreciate, you know, a nice, warm welcome like that. It's great to be here with you here in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Washington Township, up in Bergen County. Went to Immaculate Heart. Went to the shore. Growing up, we rented a place in Long Beach Island. I went with my friend to Seaside Heights. Her family had a place there. Now my mother has a home in Spring Lake, and she lives in Saddle River. So anyway, the Jersey connection is always a good one. She obviously had something to do with how I got started writing. She wrote stories as I was growing up. My father died when I was 8, and she went to work, but she was writing from 5 to 7 in the morning, and then got the 5 of us up for school, and then went into New York City and worked. But she was always she had written short stories. When I was in 7th grade, she had a book about George Washington published called Aspire to the Heavens. We were all so excited. She had a little book party at our house for her friends. The book didn't sell any copies. The publishing company went out of business, but she said, "Well, it proves I can write a book." And then she decided to try a suspense novel and was working on that and sold it when I was a senior in high school, Where Are the Children? And that came out a year and a half later. The story about the George Washington book, years later when she was becoming a successful suspense writer, we realized we all didn't have our own copies of Aspire to the Heavens. So she called a book tracing service and said, "My children want to start collecting my books." They said, "Okay, if we can find one." A month later, she got a call. They had a book. She went down and paid $100 for it. It was originally $2.95, and she opened it up and screamed. It was the autographed copy she'd given to her boss that had... He'd obviously given it to a garage sale or something. So my mother, being my mother though, wanted to call him up and say, "You know, I know you would never part with it, but now that, you know, my books are selling, Simon & Schuster wants original copies and they'll pay you $1,000 for it." But anyway, she didn't do that. My sister, who's now a judge, wouldn't let her do that. But anyway, the way I got involved was her second book was due into her agent. It was summer after my freshman year of college, Where the Children was coming out, and she didn't know how she was going to get it typed in time. In those days, those of you who know what it was like before computers, the younger people don't understand, but it was one piece of paper at a time in the typewriter. So I was home from college. I had a part-time job, and I said, "Mom, I'll retype it for you." And so I did that, and then talked to her about her characters and plots, and I did that for a number of her books. When I got out of college, I was studying acting. But two examples that have lasted. In one of her books, Loves Music, Loves to Dance, she had a girl trying to figure out who killed her friend through the personal ads in New York City. So she's going on all dates with all these different guys around New York. And she has one guy invite her to go to Rumpelmeyer's for brunch. And I don't know whether you remember, that was a place where you brought little kids for ice cream sundaes. So I called up my mother. I said, Mom, the guy invited you to Rumpelmeyer's? He'd be worse than a serial killer. So I changed all the bars in the book, and People magazine said, Clark offers a well-informed tour of New York singles haunt. So anyway, I learned so much, and then I went to LA and I was studying acting, and a guy said to me, you have this background, you should write a part you could possibly play. I think you could probably write a mystery. So a publisher was interested. I came up with Regan Reilly, a private investigator, and they said, make her mother a mystery writer. And I said, okay. And then I sat down and I wrote my first book, A Murder on a Cruise Ship. And my mother came up with the title Decked, and we liked it, and so we called it Decked. And then I had a friend who had a pantyhose business, and I went with him to a pantyhose convention, so I thought this would be a good setting for a mystery, because not too many writers have been to pantyhose conventions. So after that was Decked, I said, well, this should be Snagged. So that's how come my one-word titles happened. The other thing I did was, when I was typing my mother's book, Weep No More, My Lady, she had a cleaning woman, Elvira, from Queens, who won $40 million in the lottery. And she goes out to a spa in California, is wearing a hidden microphone in her pin because she's going to write a story. And the killer realizes Elvira is too smart. He's got to get rid of her because she's going to figure things out. So when she was in with the mask on her face, he injected her with the poison. And I'm typing this book, and her husband flies out from New York and is trying to talk her back to life in the hospital and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the chapter, she died. I called my mother. I said, you can't kill Elvira too, can you? And she said, yes, I can. Well, I begged for Elvira's life, and she kept her alive. And I didn't know it was going to mean anything. Then she was asked to write a short story, and she used Elvira and Willie and used them in a number of books. So then after I was writing for a little while, and I went with Scribner, which is a division of Simon & Schuster, they asked us to write a Christmas book together. And so we used Regan, my character, and put her together with Elvira. So I didn't know, saving her life 20 whatever years before, that I'd be writing about her. So that was fun. We've written 4 Christmas books with them. But the first one, Deck the Halls, where Regan meets Jack, who becomes her husband, and Regan's father is kidnapped. TNT just made that into a movie this summer in Vancouver. So we went up there, and I played, because of my acting background, I got a part in it. Actually, 2 parts. I play identical twins who own a bar together. One cranky, one sweet. They don't really get along. And I mean, it's a quick thing. Regan comes in trying to get, the kidnapper is giving her clues about where to go and to pick up information about where her father is. So it's not in the book, but it's in the movie. So my mother's in the background right behind drinking wine, so that's how she's an extra. And so that will be on December 20th, which should be fun to see Regan on screen for the first time, and Elvira as well. Kathy Najimy, I don't know whether you know her. She plays Elvira, and I haven't seen it yet, but I think she is probably great in it because she's funny. And then a young girl named Scotty Thompson plays Regan, and she's been in a lot of things. Is not known yet like Kathy. But the funny part is, when they told me who had been hired to play Regan, Scott Thompson, this isn't giving anything away, but in Mobbed, I have a bad guy named Scott Thompson. So that was a little weird that happened. So, I thought that was a little, maybe that's a good sign. So as a writer, we are always looking for ideas, no matter what happens. I can't have a bad day. My mother says, use it in a book. That's, but we never seem to run out of material. Last September, my mother said to me, let's go up to the grave. My grandmother, my father's mother, she died the same night as my father because she had a heart attack when she realized he was dying. And yes, it was terrible. But in the 30s, she had bought a plot up in Westchester in Gate of Heaven for 72 people. I mean, I don't know what she was thinking, but and she didn't have that much money. It's not like, but Alma bought a plot for, 24 times 3. So anyway, it was always there, and she was the head of a women's society, the Companions of the Foresters of America. When I was, they died when I was 8, but before that, I remember going up for the ceremonies every year. Anyway, last September, which is around the time of which is the anniversary of my father and grandmother's death, my mother said, "Let's go up. I want to, see the grave because we don't get up there. As it's been so long now." But we went up there, and there's a great big stone, and there are 7 names on it. And we said, by the time you get to 47, it's going to be see other side because the engravings are so big. But my mother said, this stone needs to be cleaned and blah, blah, blah. She goes, let's go down to the office. So we went down there, and of course it's a solemn place and quiet. And the woman said, we said Clark, and she taps it in. And she said, you have 8 people in there. I said, no, we don't. We have 7. And my mother said, well, wait a minute. There's Daddy. There's Mamie. I said, Mom, we were just there. There are 7 names on it. And the woman says, well, you had Vinny in 2003. We're like, who's Vinny? So we don't have any cousin named Vinny. And so she goes and gets the old ledger from the back from before computers, and it was she opens it up. It's this great big thing. And you can see the handwriting of 1947 from my grandfather, and this, and 1964 was my father, 65 my uncle, and my aunt in 99, and then you have Vincent whatever in 2003, and we said, he's not ours. So she got white out, and she showed it, and she said he was double booked. And so we just said, okay. So my mother called the funeral director, and I said, you better find out. Then I think part of the reason my mother had wanted to go up there was because my uncle was sick, my father's younger brother, and he died this past February. So it had been the first death in 12 or 13 years. And so when we went up there, and when you go to the graveside for this ceremony, and we said, he's way too far over. Vinny definitely has his spot, because Ken was and Ken would have appreciated this. Anyway, they've worked it out. I don't know. I heard my mother on the phone. It was like she was planning those seats for a wedding. She's like she had a diagram of where everybody was, but no, Vincent's not there. So she said, you can use this. I said, thank you, Mom. And, it's your material. Because I actually had Regan's father be a funeral director, because at the time my father died, the funeral director was so nice, but before he died, my father there were 2 funeral parlors in town. One was successful and one struggling. And they had been to this, at a wake, to the one that was doing well, and my father said, because he was sick, he said, don't bring me here, I don't like this place. My mother said, oh, Warren. Anyway, when she brought my grandmother and my father to the other place, after that, his business really picked up. And so he would come running over to my mother, Mary, how can I ever thank you? And so she said, anything for a friend, Paul. So he was always thanking, and so I made Regan's father a funeral director, but I didn't know I'd keep getting stories like Cousin Vinny. I know, it's true. It's crazy. Anyway, so then I started writing with Regan, and wrote Decked and Snagged. Iced I set in Aspen at Christmas time, and that was a turning point in my realizing my voice as a writer, because after I'd written the Pantyhose book, which hopefully people found amusing, it has a mystery, I thought I should be more serious now. So I set it in Aspen, and I had, because the holidays, people can get down. It's a nice time, but also it can be a disappointing time. So I had everybody in the dumps. And so I sent 150 pages to my editor, and she called me screaming, get into my office. She goes, what are you writing? And I said, well, she goes, this is not a Regan Reilly book. So I left her office in the dumps. But I was able to throw it out and start over and realize what my voice is as a writer. As one reviewer put it, Mary goes for the jugular and Carol for the funny bone in the writing, but that works just fine. So that was Iced, and then Twanged was set in the Hamptons. Then we started writing the Christmas books together, Deck the Halls, And then I got a letter, again, where do you get your ideas? I got a letter. You get very few letters now, it's emails, but I got a letter from a guy who wanted to be my butler. And I would have loved to have had a butler, but I hadn't put an ad out for a butler, and I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. But this guy put an ad in for $50,000 a year, and this was long. I mean, it's still a lot, but a while ago, he could live in or out, and he included all the things that a humble servant should do, and a story about the butler school he'd gone to somewhere in this country. So I just put it aside, and my mother was getting married to my stepfather. This was 1996, and they did an article in People magazine, and this guy saw the article and John Conheeney from Ridgewood, so he called information, and he got John Conheeney Jr., my stepbrother. He said, I wrote a letter to Carol about being her butler. I haven't heard back yet. And so he said, all right, I'll tell her. The next day he called again, blah, blah, blah. So he turned out to be a weirdo, which is great for a writer because, you're always looking for ideas. And I said, maybe I should use a butler school in a book. So I had to be in London for something, and I called the guy who has the most famous butler school there, and I said, I'm going to write a mystery, and I'd love to sit in on some classes. I'd be happy to pay to audit some classes. He started screaming at me and said, no, you can't. People try and steal my ideas all the time, blah, blah, blah. You're not going to do that. And he hung up on me. And that's when I took my mother's first piece of advice about writing, which is, if someone's mean to you, make them a victim in your next book. Everybody thinks my mother's so nice, but so I have a guy in there who has a butler school, and he doesn't fare too well in that. But that's what was fun. Other emails I get, it's very nice as a writer to hear from people, and I'm serious about to hear, I was sick, or someone said I was in the hospital, a relative was sick, and I picked up one of your books and it took my mind off my problems, and that's very gratifying as a writer. However, I did get the ones like, my name is so-and-so, I'm in advanced English class, I had to choose my favorite author. I couldn't decide between you and your mother. I chose your mother, but I don't have her email. Could you please get me? And so, or the other one is a kid writes and said, I have a book report due tomorrow. Could you please answer these 25 questions? So one time I wrote back to a kid and I said, thank you so much for choosing me to do your book report. And I'm home now, so you can call me or else give me your number and I'll call you and I'll talk to you on the phone. You can interview me. I pressed send, felt very good about myself. He wrote back, please just answer the question. So anyway, what else? You do your research. You want to make sure everything's right because no matter what, you'll hear from people. Dating back to Decked, I took place partially on a cruise ship, and I have them playing bingo. And then I got letters. I liked your book, but you're no bingo player. There's no 077 in bingo. And I was trying to think, how did that happen? Because I know I checked it. It turns out I had taken the QE2 back from England to New York, and at that time they had the British version of bingo, which does have an 077, so I didn't know. So I wrote back and said, no, you're wrong. But you always want to be right about what you're careful to make things. My mother and I have two retired detectives who have worked with us on our Christmas book, like in Deck the Halls. They told us where to have the ransom drop, that kind of thing. She works with them when she needs to. I do as well. And whatever topic you're working on, you just want to make sure it's right and makes sense, and because you don't want people to just say that could never happen or that type of thing. You just want to be accurate. Other interesting things that have happened. After Decked came out, I got a call from the publisher who said, Bernadette Castro wants to talk to you. You know who Bernadette Castro with the pull-out couches? I had Regan, do you remember her? Yes. In the book, I had Regan, this older woman who her companion couldn't take her, and she was a real character. And so nephew says, Regan, will you go with her on the cruise? And this woman's running all over the she's a comic character, but when they get to the stateroom, there's one bed. And so Regan looks at the couch and thinks, I hope it's a Bernadette Castro special. So, I mean, it was just a line I used. Well, Bernadette's friend read it. This was my first book. Called her, she called me, and she said, no, I loved it. Do you know who Imus is? And I said, yes. She said, I want to let him know about it, but you don't know what he's going to say. And I said, no, that's okay. So he talked about it, said I was ripping off my mother, and Bernadette wants me in this book, wants me to mention it because she's in it. And he said, if this book becomes a bestseller, I'm going to eat a Castro convertible. So when it came out in paperback, I called Bernadette. I said, it's a bestseller. So he had me on the show, and I was on a number of times. And then I said to Bernard once, would he ever want to have my mother on? He goes, oh, yeah. So now we go on every time we have a book out, and it's a lot of fun to do that. And that's what we hear about so often wherever we go. Game shows. I came home one night, and Jeopardy was on, and the category was mysteries, and it said her daughter, Carol, I think they said Carol Higgins Clark published her first book, Decked, in 1992. Well, all three contestants stood there. And one of them finally said, who was Agatha Christie? So I told my mother, and she said, it keeps you humble. Which reminds me of the time when we've written 5 Christmas books together, and one of them is set on a cruise ship, Santa Cruz. So we got it on a cruise to the Bahamas just by ourselves for 5 or 6 days, just to immerse ourselves in writing the book and absorb it. We had both been on cruises, but it's great to get back on and just really be there. So the first day we were wandering around, and there were big crowds of families mostly, and a lot of kids, and we got off the elevator and we saw the captain over by the staircase. So we wandered over and said, oh, we're writing a mystery set on a cruise ship, and he could care less, you could tell. I mean, he just couldn't care less, and so we were a little deflated. So then a woman came off the elevator, and she saw my mother, and she came darting over, and she said, excuse me, could I get a picture? My mother goes, oh, yes. The woman said, could you get out of the way, please? She wanted a picture with the captain, So anyway, we went up and wrote our book after that. It's always like I said, use it in a book. Coincidences, it's kind of strange sometimes when you put things in a book and then they really happen. In my book, Cursed, I had Regan started out in LA, and now she lives in New York with Jack. He's the head of the major case squad. But a few years ago, I started to write Cursed, and I bought a condo in LA, and I went out there, and I did it all backwards. I mean, I had them do the kitchen, then I had someone scrape the ceiling and do painting and molding, and I hired this guy, and I paid him, and then he called for more money. Thank God I didn't send it, because I came back, and the molding was all over the floor, and I called him up, and I said, what happened? He goes, in Cursed, I have a girl who calls Regan to help her find her ex-boyfriend who disappeared with the money her grandmother had given her to buy a house, $100,000, and her grandmother is coming out now to help her look for that house, and the money's not around. So turns out he had gone to Texas to pay his traffic tickets. He had worked on a film there, and they threw him in jail, whatever. So this guy, I'm writing this book, I come back, the molding's all over the floor. I call the guy and I said, what happened? He goes, well, I went to pay my traffic tickets. He was in jail. Well, I was writing about a character that was in jail. So, I mean, it's just kind of a little weird, a little psychic. Characters' names. We're always looking for names, and when you've written so many books, you've used a lot of names. You're trying to think of names that don't have any significance to people in your life, especially if it's a weird character. I mean, and last year I wrote Wrecked, and my mother and I usually fax each other pages along the way, but we were both just to see what the other one's doing, what do you think, that kind of thing, and we didn't this time. And I was at my editor's office going over the page proofs of mine. My mother had finished 2 weeks before. she came in, she said, the copy editor said, you probably shouldn't use the name Gannon. At the end of Wrecked, I have a small but important character named Jimmy Gannon who comes in. And I said, why not? She said, Gannon's the main name in your mother's book. And I never even knew it. So, we do think alike at certain times. But the other funny character was, or the name, in Zapped, I have a guy who dumps a girl, and his name is Blaze Darling. There was a girl in my dorm, her last name was Darling, and then I thought Blaze, and so I thought, this guy is such a creep in the book. Let me just Google the name just to make sure it's not someone famous, and so my computer almost went on fire. The hottest porno couple around is Blaze Darling, so anyway, what else? Wrecked, I set at Cape Cod because we've been going up there for years, and Regan and Jack go up for their first anniversary, and there's a big storm, and then he goes out to get milk the next morning after they arrive, and then there are two women who live down the block who need a place to stay, and then the caretaker discovers a woman on the beach, and they go back to carry her up, and her body's been washed away, and we've been going to Cape Cod for years, so I decided to set it there. With Mobbed, the one I just set in New Jersey, I said I've got to set a book in New Jersey, and then discovered that New Jersey had the first log cabin. Did you all know that? What's great about Google now is, the internet has a lot of good things about it besides being the complaints people have, but it's great to be able to do research on it, because I would never set a book somewhere I had never been, but then you can do so much checking on facts, and even when I was writing Cursed about a park in LA that the guy went to, and it's just very helpful in that regard. We haven't written a Christmas book in a few years because we've been so busy, but we'd like to. Right now I'm working on Gypped, my mother's working on God, what's the name of her? We can never even remember the title. She's written over 40 books now. It's amazing. But that's what it is, the life of a writer. It's fun. It's hard, obviously, to come up with the plots. It's amazing how technology has changed things. When I first wrote Decked, Regan is on a cruise ship. I had gone to a school in Oxford for a term in college, not the university, but a school for foreigners. And so I thought I would set that first book at a reunion, and then on a cruise ship on the way back. Well, fax machines had just come into use, and so I was able to have Regan communicating with the police in Oxford about a murder by fax. Now you can do the email, but then I couldn't have written Deck the way it was if fax machines hadn't happened. Now with cell phones and the internet and Twitter, and it's just, the only thing is it's hard to have someone missing for too long, because, people can usually find someone now, or there was just a man missing in LA. He had fallen, his car had gone down a ravine. Did you see that story? And there was another man right next to him. Did you see that part of the story? It was the chances of that happening were, but one had his cell phone turned off, and the other had it turned on, but I thought you could still, I meant to ask, because my mother and I had discussed that, whether or not you could still pick up the signals on someone's cell phone if it were turned off. That was in my mental notes, because I'm always looking at this kind of thing, but they were able to pick up on certain things because of picking up on the cell phone. So that's great in some ways for a writer, but in others it's harder to get things to be too to make it harder to reach someone. Or in the old days, remember when we didn't have answering machines at all, or forget cell phones, never mind answering, or if you had an answering machine, you couldn't even call into it. You had to wait to get home to get the messages. So, but it's fun. I found it easier to write having the internet for Regan to use, having the cell phone. Although a writer like Sue Grafton is able to, she still sets her character in the time that she originally set her, so she's still, and she obviously is very successful at it. Which reminds me, we're in a writers group that meets the first Tuesday of every month for dinner. Last night, my mother and I were there just to talk about writing. Harlan Coben, Linda Fairstein, Susan Isaacs, Lawrence Block, a bunch of us. And one time, Warren Murphy was there. He hasn't been there lately because he moved away. But he said, okay, you're alone in a house, 3 in the morning. It's pitch dark, the middle of nowhere. What is the scariest sound you could hear? So someone said glass shattering, a scream, the screech of tires. He said, no, you're alone, middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, it's pitch dark, and the toilet flushes. So, I mean, it's like, it's true, right? So, and that happened to me, that kind of thing happened to me when my mother and I were writing Dashing Through the Snow, which was the last Christmas book in 2008. I was at her house in Saddle River, and she had an elevator put in because she has a bad foot and she can't always do the stairs all the time. So at 5 o'clock, she and my stepfather left. They had an event to go to, and I went to the back bedroom where my stuff was. I was going to go into the city for the night to my apartment. And so I was there getting my stuff together all by myself in a house. And 10 minutes later, I heard the whir of the elevator. And oh my God, I ran out of that house so fast. I mean, I was down the hall, out. I had my cell phone. I called the Saddle River police. I said, don't race over here. But so they came in, checked the whole, because I called my mother. I couldn't reach her. And they checked the whole house, with the guns going all around. And then I reached my mother. She goes, oh, after 15 minutes, it goes back to home base, which is the second floor. I said, well, that's a waste of energy if I ever heard it. But I mean, that can be so much scarier than, because I'm telling you, when I was there by myself and I thought, there's somebody upstairs, and my brother said to me, what thief calls the elevator? And I said, I don't know, but well, if he was carrying out a lot of stuff, he might have been. But that's the type of thing that really, is you try and pick up as a writer, because that is the scary stuff. It's not just hearing a scream, but those little things, like in Misery, when if she came back and saw the little statue was moved just a little bit, that was enough to set her off. Oh my God, that poor guy.
I get to make people's dreams a reality and help them protect their most valuable assets.
Every day, I get to give your dreams a chance.
I got my start at Brookdale.
I got my start at Brookdale.
I'm Arnold Foslu. As an actor, I've had many fight scenes. But now as an environmentalist, I'm in a real fight. The fight to protect threatened and endangered wildlife. Each year, millions of people travel to exotic locations to have encounters with the world's dwindling populations of wild animals. Sadly, many tourists take more than just memories back home with them from these trips. They take souvenirs made from the very animals they sought to see, including bracelets made from elephant ivory, fur rugs made from big cats such as tigers, jaguars, and cheetahs, jewelry made from sharks' teeth, and even trinkets made from the shells of sea turtles. What you may not know is that thousands of wild animals are killed to make these souvenirs. Join me in supporting IFAW's campaign to end this cruelty and to keep wildlife where it belongs, in the wild. You can make a difference. Please sign our online pledge today and think twice. Don't buy wildlife souvenirs.
Aren't you gonna kiss me?
I gotta go.
Nobody likes to kiss an ashtray.
Anyway, I have more to say, but does anyone have any questions? I've been talking for a little while. Anyone any questions yet? Yes.
Hi. Do you and your mother have different styles of writing? Are you able to mesh, or do you write the same as Mother Joy?
You mean when we write together, or we write together? We get no one believes that we don't fight. When they always said, "Come on, tell us about the fights." No, we sit down and we get along very well when we write together. when we were thinking up a name for Regan's husband, well, when she met him, we thought Jack, we liked that name, and she's Regan Reilly, and we said, what should be his last name? And we were both sitting thinking, we looked at each other and at the exact same second said, Reilly? You know, Regan Reilly meets Jack Reilly. But no, it's kind of nice when you're escaping the real world and just creating a fictional world. And my mother's funny, but she can't use humor in her books because her books are the psychological suspense. So she loves, you know, having her character Elvira and being able to bring out that side of her personality. So it really is fun, and we're always together. Usually, a couple times we've been on the phone a little bit, but we're in the same room. And as we said, we use up the energy in one room. I have the laptop, so we'll go into another room, you know, just to move around a little bit. But we enjoy it, and haven't done it for a couple years now, just because it's so busy. But hopefully, we'll do it again next year. Yes, sure.
When you start writing a book, do you have the plot outline and you know who the characters are and who did it, or do you just sort of make it up as you go along?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I definitely have an idea of what I'm doing and where I'm going, but I think for me anyway, some authors do that. To plot out everything would be very difficult because it takes time getting to know your characters and to sit there and think, okay, well then this will happen and that will happen. Somehow for me, the way it is it happens along the way. I mean, not that you don't have some sort of structure. You know you're going from New York to California. You just, you know, the route takes twists and turns, and that's the way I work, and mostly the way my mother works as well.
So you have an overall view, and then you fill in the details.
You fill it in, yes, and you say, okay, now this, and I usually know the time frame it's going to happen between. You know, my books don't take place over long periods of time. It's usually 3 or 4 days, something like that. Yes?
Do you ever suffer from writer's block? And if so, do you have any rituals you use to get out of writer's block?
My mother's joke is whenever she gets writer's block, she thinks royalty checks. You know, but and she goes, it solves the problem. But usually it's just. It's the plotting. It's not, it's more just trying to, and if I think I'm having trouble, then I might look for, you know, if I'm working on a certain topic, do some reading on the internet about it. But it's more the plotting that causes it than, because I like to write and I love creating the characters, but you have to figure out where you're going. And I think for me, that's where and again, writing a mystery, you have to have some order to it in what's going on. Yes?
I was going to ask you, maybe in regards to your book mob specifically, but just in general, do you have a time frame that you decide to write in, or a schedule, or what is your method of?
My method, I'm writing a book a year, so I know I have to have it finished by the end of the year, basically into January. And I'm working with my editor. You know, I send her stuff along the way because it comes out in April. So I just figure that and know. And then at the end, you really get into it. I mean, that was with Wrecked. I was writing that. I was finishing it when we had. I live alone in New York. I'm in the building the plane crashed into 5 years ago. Remember that, the Yankee pitcher? But I faced the river. You know, one of the things is facing the river. Anyway, it was a Thursday, and I knew I had to finish the book, and it was all up here. It was coming out, and I wrote all night long and sent my editor Paige. I talked to her at noontime, and it was Friday, and she said, oh, I got pizza for the kids who came into the office. And I thought, oh, that's nice. And then I had talked to my sister, and she had left work early the day before, but I didn't really know why, because I hadn't turned on the news or the internet. I was just writing. I was getting it down. And then finally I called my mother's house later in the afternoon. I said, did we have some kind of storm? And my stepfather said, it's the worst blizzard since 1946. And I had no idea, because looking out my window, it's the river, so you don't see it piling up. And I knew it had been snowing, but, you know, the whole tri-state area was in havoc, and I was at Cape Cod with Regan and Jack, so that's really fun when that happens, when you feel like these are real characters, and you know, the story is, you know, coming to a close, and the climax scene and all that. But anyway, it's basically I know when I have to get it done by. Yes.
how do you work with your editors? Do you have something in your contract where you have the final say-so over the content?
Well, I've worked with this one editor, Roz, for about 11 years now, and actually she's from West Long Branch, and so we just work. There's nothing in the contract. I don't think there's anything in the contract. We just work together, and you know, I think I basically have the last word, but, you know, in one book she said, no, I don't think you should do that. And I said, and I agree, I went her way and she was absolutely right. You know, so, you know, it's a give and take, and that's the nice way, or the best way to work with an editor, is if you have someone who you just work well together, and sometimes, you know, you let them have it, sometimes she lets me, and it's just the general idea of you're both trying to get the best story possible, and we just happen to have a very good relationship. My mother's been with her editor, Michael Korda, for years and years, and they work very well together, so that's just the way it is. Yes?
Do you find photographs of people that fit your characters so that you have a good...
You know, someone just said to, my mother and I just did a commercial for New Jersey last week, by the way. She was inducted into the New Jersey Hall of Fame in June, and we were asked to do a commercial at the Yogi Berra Museum. There's a reason I'm telling you this. We're Jersey proud, and Harlan was in it, and Yogi Berra and Governor Christie, his wife, are going to be in it. But the guy from the Hall of Fame said he knows an author who cuts out pictures and puts them. I've never done that. I've usually kind of envisioned someone in my mind, but I think it's a good idea. We were just talking about that last week. Yeah, if you see a picture in a magazine or a newspaper and say, this would be good for a character, yes. Yes? Yeah.
Hi. I love how, like, since she met Jack, like, each of your books kind of takes you a part of their life.
Right.
Like, they get married, then the honeymoon in Ireland, then they get back, I think zapped. So I like the dynamic between those two. Are you going to keep delving a little bit more into that as you go on?
Yes. Yes. No, they're married in their anniversary in Wrecked, and then Mobbed, and people ask, are they going to have kids? And I don't know. The only thing is, if Regan's 7 months pregnant, she can't be chasing down some guy. You know, that's what I'm a little concerned about. But, and then, you know, if she has young children. So I think I'm going to keep it like Nancy Drew for a while, where she keeps to say, you know. You can,
I like how you pushed like his family, a little bit of his family.
Right.
I like that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, because Jack's from a big family, and I haven't used them that much, and I'm trying to bring them in a little bit more now, too. Thank you. Yes, so that's what I'm doing. Thanks. So we'll see about the family, but like I say, the Bobbsey twins were, you know, like they were for a long time. Yes.
Who do you consider to be the greatest mystery writer of all time, and who does your mother consider? Is there any conflict there?
I'm supposed to say Mary Higgins Clark, and although she would say me about herself. I don't know who the greatest one of all time is. Who do you think is the greatest one of all time?
Agatha Christie.
Oh, you do? Yeah. No, she's wonderful, obviously. I don't have a particular one who's a favorite. Obviously, my mother had the most influence on me with me retyping her books and all that stuff, but I just love reading all different kind of mysteries, and I loved reading Nancy Drew as a kid. I mean, I thought she had the greatest life. She had that red... What?
My 9-year-old loves Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew. She's got that convertible. She's got a boyfriend. She's got nice friends, and she's got a lot of excitement in her life.
Jack are kind of like a modern day.
Well, that's what people say, you know, that the Nancy Drew kind of thing. So, yeah. And someone had a question right there. Yeah.
You get most of your own ideas from your own experience, but yet you do have your brothers and sisters. Do they give you a call and say, Carol, this happened, and this was so weird? Do they give you ideas?
Not really. I mean, I think I have enough material myself. You know, in our family, everybody tells stories, so I've never gotten a particular idea. I mean, they don't say, they might report on something that happened, but so there's always something going on, but they don't particularly say that. I mean, I was just in Los Angeles, and I'm telling you, I saw a guy who was trying to steal a car, and I went to the Grove. It's a shopping center, and I had a rental car, because when I go out there, I'm not there enough to keep a car there. And so I came back and I couldn't find the rental car. And all I was thinking was, I didn't take the insurance on the car. And I have my own insurance, but I don't know how much it would cover. And so I'm going around going, oh God, where's the car? And then I saw a guy come out and he had keys and he had a piece of paper in his hand. And so he looks, and the only reason I noticed him was because I was looking for my car. Most people are preoccupied with going to their own car, getting in and going home. So the next time he goes and he sticks his key in a car, it doesn't work, and he hurries off. Well, most people would say, wait a minute, oh, this isn't my car. So I started following him, which my mother almost killed me when I told her this story, but I followed him because he's going all around the lot, looking around like this. And then he went and took the escalators down to the 4th floor, so I followed him down to the 4th floor. And I know, but I really wanted my car back. By this time, I was sure he had stolen my car and come back for another. And so then he's going, he's surveying the whole area, and then he went over to the stair, and then he turned and he looked at me. And I turned away, and then he looked and he darted back up the steps. So I went down to the concierge. It's a lovely shopping area. So I went down and I told the concierge, she goes, all right, I'll walk you over to security. I said, well, we should really hurry. This guy might be stealing a car. And so I went to security, and then the guy they went and got him, and he goes, well, let's take a drive around. Of course, I found my car, so they thought I was a ditz. But, that didn't help my cause. But they didn't seem to take me seriously at all. And I'm telling you, who walks around, you kind of have an idea where your car is. And this guy just came out, tried one, and then was. So now the wheels are turning with, what I'm going to use with car theft. Exactly, because when I was out there, John Travolta's car was stolen off the street. He had a vintage car that he just parked on a side street and went into a car dealer. It was in 10 minutes, came out, it was gone. And so it's a big thing. I mean, and I heard in New Jersey now, in northern New Jersey, there are a lot of car thefts and people keep their cars unlocked, which no one should do, but people going in and taking things. So there always seems to be things, and I guess I'm always looking for things too, but doesn't that sound a little suspicious? I mean, this guy running around these two, yes. But then I thought I'm not following him back up the steps because I value my life more than the rental car. But anyway, but I also wanted to, it was also, I felt like Regan Reilly, and so that's what my editor said. She wrote back, "Dear Regan," when I sent her an email about it. But it was, to be a real PI or police officer, you put your life on the line, but it's exciting that when you do catch, obviously, when you catch someone and, but anyway, I don't do that too often, but I just really felt like I had just stumbled upon something because again, I was aware, other people just going to their cars, you don't notice someone looking all around. So, yes?
Funny you should mention the New Jersey Hall of Fame because the three of us were there.
Oh, you were there? Oh, good. That was fun, wasn't it?
It was really nice.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to get the date of the movie again.
Oh, the movie is going to be on December 20th. TNT. So they asked us to be on a panel in November. They're doing, TNT is trying to bring back the Tuesday night movie. And so they are doing one of Scott Turow's books, Sandra Brown's, Richard North Patterson. And so we're all going to be on a panel together, and this is an experiment, which is great because of all the reality shows, there are less TV movies now. And so it would be nice if it works. Lifetime has movies, but a lot of them don't anymore. So we'll see how it works out. Yes?
Do you carry a tape recorder or pen and paper just in case something happens and you just write it down?
Yes, I do. I do keep a pen and paper. And actually, after the garage thing, when I got home, I wrote down everything. On that, I definitely did. But I don't keep a tape, but I always keep a pen and paper for ideas, or if someone says a funny line or a line of dialogue, that type of thing. I try and keep track of all that. Yes?
That's another question. Do you pretty much write your novels in, from beginning to end, or do you go, from when it begins the mystery all the way to the end, or sometimes you maybe think, okay, I know this is going to happen, so I'll write that and then go back? Because you have so many characters in your books.
No, I write from beginning to end.
So from, say, Tuesday to Friday?
Yes, okay. Because it's just like with the Christmas books. my mother and I would never say, okay, you write this chapter, I write that chapter, because you don't know everything that's going to happen in a chapter that leads to the next chapter. So I always just...
Because you always have so many characters. Do you find sometimes you maybe have too many, or do you have sometimes...
I don't know. I mean,
or add in?
I just... There's no formula. Yeah, I just try and usually have two different plot lines going on, two different stories, and then just try to...
So like every other... Yeah, I noticed that, like every other chapter.
Goes back and forth between the two plot lines. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And they end up together at the end.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I could never start in the middle because I think that would be...
I didn't think so, but
yeah. No, some people might write a chapter. You know, you hear different stories about what writers do. So, no, I do that. Yes?
If you have an idea for a book, and you've actually been, writing it, like say for me, do you have to actually complete like the whole book before you would find an editor? Like how would you find an editor?
Well, you would have to sell the book. I mean, you'd have to get an agent first to represent you, and which isn't easy. The way the publishing world is now, especially today, not that it can't be done, but the first thing is you have to get someone to represent you, and then you sell it. The agent will send it around and try and sell it to a publisher. And if they like it enough, they will buy it and then assign you an editor to work with, on what needs to be done on it. So that's the way it happens.
You have the book completely done, and then
yes,
you have to probably work with it and change it according to maybe what the editor would want.
Basically, I mean, not that you would necessarily want to. You might not agree with it and not want to go with it, but usually they're the ones, if they buy it and you really want to get published and it sticks close enough to your story, that's what it would be. But you'd have to finish it first and then try and get an agent to represent it. And yes.
Besides your website, how often do you use your social networking sites for promotion?
I'm getting my website redone right now. The Facebook, I'm trying to be on. I haven't been on it in a couple of weeks, but add things all the time just to keep people interested. And Twitter, I think, is hard because how much do you have to say after? It's what are you going to say after? I mean, some people can do it, but it's good to use all that because people do follow that kind of thing, and the fan pages and that kind of thing is helpful. Now so much marketing is done through the internet. The TNT asked us to do something for Goodreads.com, an online interview to promote the movie, and so we're going to be doing that. But the internet's very big for all that now. And it's, when you see so many people get all their news from the internet now, I still like to read a paper, but some people use their computers or their iPads or whatever. Yes?
Do you have a Kindle?
No, I don't yet. My mother got one. I don't have one yet. I still...
You still like the paper?
I still like the paper, yeah. Do you have one?
No.
No?
You still like the paper?
You still like the paper too. It would be nice if there's just a nice mix of... obviously people like to read the ebooks, but you don't want bookstores or libraries to go out of business. And so I would just love to see it where there's a happy medium where we can have both. And because people are reading more with the Kindles, because you can order a book right up, so that's good. But you don't want it to turn into all that because then enough bookstores have closed already, and Borders and a lot of the independents. So hopefully we can keep both. Yes. And you tell me when I have to, give me the hook. Okay, 2 more, okay, yeah.
Go on those mystery cruises?
I have a long time ago. I did a few things with my mother way back, even before I was writing. And I went to Mohonk, Mohonk Mystery Mountain. I did that a couple times. Did anybody here ever do that? That was kind of fun. But I haven't done anything like that for a long time. It's kind of, have you done it?
Yes, we went on the QE2, and I didn't know it was one.
Yeah.
Suddenly all of these bodies were falling from out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, on the QE2? Again. Oh my gosh.
What was going to happen happen next? Are you going to do any?
No plans for it. There was one they asked us to do, but it would take a whole week next May, and that's just too long. And it's when our books are out. It's called Murder at Sea. I think they're going to have some writers on that if anyone's interested, but it was just hard to commit to something like that for a whole week. But those things can be fun. I remember outside there was someone on the netting of the pool, you know, and it was someone that you find body and, you know. And okay, one more, yes.
I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on e-publishing for new authors.
You mean publishing them yourself, or?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about it, but I guess it's sort of a self-publishing. But it seems to be that there are a lot of advances with technology, and that might be an option as opposed to going through a more traditional route.
Right. Well, it's definitely out there. There's some guy who wrote I'll have to find out what it was, but someone in our writers group guy. This guy just promoted himself and did the e-publishing and sold tons of books. So it's definitely an option. It's just you have to make you don't have a publisher helping you make the reading public aware of your work. So it's definitely an option if you just get it out there somehow. And there are books on how to do it. So if you're not having any luck getting a publisher, I would definitely try it because it's worked for people. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. It's great to be with a Jersey crowd. Yeah.